The KFC down the block from my apartment had the creepiest statue of Colonel Sanders I've ever seen. It stood in the corner of the dining room, at least 8 feet tall, looming over customers as they scarfed down chicken and mashed potatoes. No one ever sat at the table closest to the statue. There was just a bad vibe the closer you got to the thing. Cold spots, weird smells, a sense that you were being watched. The creepy statue didn't stop me from eating at the KFC at least twice a week, but it did dampen the experience. It was eerie how lifelike the sculpture looked. The perfect white hair and goatee, the wrinkles under the eyes, the ivory pale suit, and just a peak of pink tongue inside its square teeth. You half expected the giant thing to clear its throat at any moment. I started working part-time at that KFC one winter to try to save up extra for gifts, though that's when I swore off fast food for good. Things weren't too bad until they moved me to the night shift about a month into my time at the restaurant. If the Colonel Sanders statue was creepy during the day, it was downright freaky at night. The face always seemed a little different to me each time I glanced at it, the eyes a bit colder. I started taking pictures of the statue each night to check if I was crazy, if it was really changing. However, no matter the angle or lighting, the pic always turned out blurry on my phone. I didn't much enjoy going into work that winter, but I managed to push through it because the pay kept going up. Even after the holidays, I decided to stay on since I was now making enough to actually save up money for the first time in my life. Then, one night in January, I made a terrible mistake. I offered to close the KFC on my own after the night shift. Mandy was supposed to help me. She's a cute redhead that started around the same time as I did. But she was feeling ill, so I offered to handle closing alone. I was trying to score some points with her before working up the courage to ask her on a date. After that awful night, I never saw Mandy again. Once the last customers were gone, I began my closing process. I locked the doors, I turned off the main lights, then I pulled out a Bluetooth speaker, placed it on the table in the dining room, and started to mop up while jamming to some classic rock. I wiped down all the surfaces except that table near the Sanders statue. Again, nobody sat there, so it was always pristine. We had an official policy to only ever close with 2 or more staff on site. The official reason was safety and accountability. But as the minutes ticked by, I felt like someone was moving around the restaurant, just out of my sight. I was about to start cleaning the bathrooms when I heard a commotion in the kitchen. "Mandy?" I called out, holding my mop up for self-defense, I guess. There was a scraping sound followed by silence. I hopped over the counter, still holding onto the mop like it was a club. Something had knocked over the warming station in the back of the kitchen. It's a series of metal shelves and heat lamps to keep food hot. It was heavy too. Far too heavy for a draft or rats. Yeah, we had rats. To displace. I leaned the mop against the wall and pushed the warming station back into position. When I turned back towards the dining room, I yelped. The Colonel Sanders statue had moved while I wasn't looking. It hadn't shifted much, just a slight turn of the head, but it was unmistakably different than it was moments before. His eyes were wider, almost black in the low light, and his smile was sharper than before, wider. "I'm imagining this," I said out loud, clutching the mop so hard my knuckles popped. The statue didn't respond. I mean, of course it didn't. It was a friggin' statue after all. Nothing but plaster and paint. Still, I decided to rush through the bathroom cleaning and risk getting reprimand from my supervisor in my next shift. "Hey, are you here alone?" A raspy voice asked me from further back in the kitchen. I froze. "Mandy?" I asked again, still not turning to look. "No, sorry, not Mandy." The voice was male with a slight accent I couldn't place. Swallowing hard, I turned to look for the source. There was something wrong with the light in the back of the kitchen. Everything was cast in a deep, unnatural shade. I saw a figure within the gloom, a shadow darker than the shadows around it, shaped like a man. "Who are you?" I asked. I couldn't see its face, but I had the impression the shadow smiled. "I was many things. A soldier, a chef, a business owner, human. Now what I am is here, with you. Did you say that you were alone? Or did I imagine that?" My mouth was dry. I was having a hard time speaking. There was a loud creak from behind me in the dining room. Then another. I glanced back quickly, not wanting to take my eyes off the shadow in the kitchen for too long. The Colonel Sanders statue had moved again. Now it was standing in the middle of the dining room, partially hunched over like it was trying to sneak, or getting ready to leap. "Do you know why I started calling these places KFC?" the shadow asked. I turned back to find that it was closer to me too. The light in all of the kitchen was dim now, and growing darker by the minute. I felt trapped between two hungry things, just waiting for me to run so they could chase me. All I could do was stall for time. "KFC, well, it means Kentucky Fried." "No!" the Shadow Man growled. "That's what they made me call it. But KFC originally stood for the kind of crowd I wanted to bring into my restaurants. Killer's favorite chicken." There was a creak again from behind me. I knew the statue was moving in the dining room. There was the sound of heavy dragging, tables being pushed out of the way. I wanted to turn and look, but I didn't want to put my back to the shadow in the kitchen. At any moment, I expected to feel a giant plaster hand reach around to the back of my neck and squeeze. A bell rang softly. Suddenly, the light was back to normal in the kitchen. "Nick," a familiar voice called out. "Why are you standing behind the counter holding up a mop?" It was Mandy. She'd come in from the front door, unlocking it with her staff key. The bell was above that door and sounded any time a customer came in. I put the mop down and leaned against the counter. There was no sign of that shadow thing in the kitchen. When I looked out over to the dining room, I saw that the Colonel Sanders statue was back in its usual corner, exactly how it was at the start of my shift. "Geez, Nick, you look awful," Mandy said, walking towards me. "What are you doing here?" "I felt guilty asking you to close up alone. I figured I would help you finish up." "Nick? Nick, are you okay? You look like you're going to throw up." Without saying a word, I hopped over the counter, took Mandy's hand, and walked us both out of the KFC without locking up. Just as the front door was closing, I heard another creak, as if some massive plaster figure was shifting to watch us leave. That was the last time I stepped foot in a KFC or any other restaurant. I quit the next morning, calling my manager to ensure that she knew it was my fault the place wasn't closed properly. I didn't want Mandy to get in trouble, though I did beg her to find somewhere else to work. She promised she'd think about it. I never did work up the nerve to ask her out. I ended my lease early and moved out of the city within a month. I've got a new place now, smaller but comfortable enough. I don't leave my apartment much these days. I can work from home, and I get all my food delivered. The rare times I step outside for a walk, well, I walk fast. Maybe it's my imagination, but sometimes it feels like something is out there, looking for me, just out of sight. When I sleep, which isn't often, I dream of creaking sounds and shadows where they shouldn't be. After passing high school, I decided to take a part-time job in a pizza joint to support my college education. I always preferred being self-dependent, so when my dad wanted to pay for college, I refused to take his help. After the classes in the morning, I had the entire day free, so instead of wasting time, I took this job at Domino's Pizza. I worked the night shifts 3 days a week. The payment was enough to keep me going without asking for money from my parents. They liked this headstrong attitude of mine, so my father gave me his old car to drive to work. It's an old black Chevy, one you can easily see in the 60s Hollywood movies. I loved this car a lot, because apart from being old, it had some personality. The day was Wednesday. I drove to the pizza place and was parking my car when I heard my boss yelling at Jeremy. Jeremy was our delivery guy and not much of a talker. Jeremy stood with a sad face while my boss shouted at him. "I don't understand. You are being quite irresponsible for the last few weeks, Jeremy. How could you just lose someone's order? The only reason I keep on tolerating you is that I know how tough things are for you and your mom right now. But one more mistake and you'll be out. This is your last warning." My boss, Mr. Macaron, got into his car and left for home. I walked to Jeremy and said, "Did you lose another order again?" "Yeah." "Let it be. You'll get better at this." Even though I said this, I couldn't help but think how weird he was. For the last few weeks, Jeremy always happened to lose a pizza somehow. He says he dropped it, misplaced it, the customer didn't answer the door, etc. I think he eats it and makes excuses so he doesn't have to pay for it. Mr. Macaron is not a nice guy, so he keeps a tab on every employee so we don't eat for free. I tried lending some money to Jeremy to save himself from this humiliation, but he denied it. I sat behind the counter waiting for the customers to arrive when the phone rang. "Welcome to Domino's Pizza. May I take your order?" "Yes, I would like to order a 5-meat feast. Make it large." "Sure, can I get your address?" "Yes, it's the house number 34, 2 blocks from your place." I noted down the contact number and the name of the customer and went to the kitchen to tell the night chef to prepare the order. When I came back, Jeremy asked me a pretty weird question. "Is that an order?" What else would it be? Are you alright?" "No, I'm fine." "So how many pizzas were ordered?" Just one. Here, take the address and number." Oh, it's not far." I expected him to be happy knowing he wouldn't have to drive far, but instead he seemed upset that the customer lived close by. But then quickly it hit me. He was upset he wouldn't be able to make up some story this time. As we waited for the order to be finished, Jeremy started walking back and forth, being all tense. I looked at him and said, "Hey, tell the chef to make one more. You can take it. I'll pay for it this time, but you have to stop eating the customer's orders." "That's what you think I do?" "What else makes sense? Tell me you're not stupid enough to lose a box of pizza every other day." Jeremy stared at me in a very creepy way and said, "You want to know the truth?" "Well, sure." "It's not me who eats them." "Then who is it, Jeremy? Is there something you're not telling me?" "I don't think you can handle the truth." The order came in, and taking the pizza in one hand, Jeremy rolled his eyes in anger and stormed out of the store. What does he mean by he is not eating these pizzas? And what is this truth he's talking about? I decided to find out once and for all what exactly is going on with this dude. We worked for a few more hours. Orders came in, and one by one, Jeremy delivered them all. When it was about closing time, I got a call from a customer complaining that they didn't get their order. I somehow managed the situation by telling them we ran short on supplies and closed for the night. Jeremy hadn't come back yet, so I waited to confront him. The night chef left, and I came out to pee when I saw headlights of Jeremy's car on the road. I stood in the corner under the shade so that he wouldn't notice me. He came out of the car but didn't walk in right away. He peeked inside the restaurant, trying to see if I was there or not, and then went back to his car. Realizing I wasn't around at the moment, he took out a box of pizza from his car and went around the back. I followed him silently. At the back, there is a storage unit. Thinking he was hiding there to eat this one, I peeked in. But Jeremy was inside the storage unit and talking to someone in a low voice. "This is the last time, Shelley. I can't keep you here anymore. I have to come up with some other plan, because if anyone sees you, they will kill you. But I don't want to go away. I love this pizza, especially after you add this secret ketchup." I've known Jeremy for a while. Shelley was none other than his 10-year-old little sister. But when I contemplated more on this thought, my body became numb with fear. There's no way Shelley is in that storage unit talking to Jeremy. Because a few months back, Shelley died falling from the roof. It was an accident, and that's why our boss feels obligated to keep him hired even after making many mistakes. What the hell is going on then? I couldn't believe my ears as I heard Shelley's voice. I tiptoed to the storage unit. As I looked inside from the half-closed shutter, my stomach dropped. There was no one inside except Jeremy. He was sitting there all by himself, holding the pizza in his right hand and looking at some invisible being. What happened next was probably the sickest thing I'll ever witness in my entire life. Jeremy took out a paper knife and cut his palm. He then said, "Now, finish your dinner. I know you are very hungry. I just hope Mom will let you come home again. Then I won't have to hide you anymore." He then sprinkled his dripping blood all over the pizza like ketchup and said, "Enjoy it with your special ketchup, Shelley." And then got up and sat on the opposite side and said in the voice of a 10-year-old girl, "Yes, I will. Domino's makes the best pizza." He then started to eat the pizza wrapped around his blood. The way he was chomping on the pizza and smearing the blood on his mouth while laughing like a creepy girl made my skin crawl. I finally understood why he said he doesn't eat them. Though Jeremy was eating, he was playing the role of his dead little sister in his mind. It didn't take much time for me to realize that his sister's death hammered him to such an extent that he created an alter ego within himself that talks like Shelley. So even if to everyone he was Jeremy, in his mind he was Shelley eating and talking. I had no choice but to call the cops. When they came and took him away, he wasn't saying a single word. He was just looking around, searching for someone. After this incident was revealed, Jeremy's mom almost died out of a heart attack. The doctors told her that her son suffers from a dissociative identity disorder. In his mind, he thinks his sister is alive and that he has to take care of her until her mom lets her come back home. The gravity of this mental illness is so horrifying that he completely zones out when he plays his sister's role. His voice becomes like a 10-year-old. He sits and behaves like his sister. Years have gone by after this incident, but I still keep in contact with Jeremy. He is now in a mental institution. The last time I visited him, he said some pretty disturbing stuff to me. He looked at me in the eye and replied, "If Shelley comes knocking at your door in the middle of the night, don't forget to bring her pizza from Domino's, and do add her favorite ketchup." I was driving by the road when giant lightning struck nearby. The night has already been quite challenging for me, and now this. I'm already late for work, and the rainy weather could only make things worse for me. Along with the rumbling thunder outside, I could also hear the gurgling sound of my empty stomach. I recalled the last time I ate was in the afternoon, and now it's past midnight. Thinking about finding a department store on the highway, I slowed down when heavy rainfall occurred. Damn it! I switched on the car wipers to get a clear view, but there was nothing on the sides of the road except for deep woods. I almost lost the hope of finding food for the night when a bright purple light fell on my windshield. I fastened the wiper's speed and saw a drive-thru of Taco Bell beaming at some distance. The large Bell logo was glittering to let passerbyers know it was there. Thanking God for this unexpected attention, I got into the lane. It was a small joint. I drove the car towards the window and stopped right next to it. I didn't see anyone sitting near it. I honked the car horn, not being clear if it was closed due to bad weather or something. Still, no one came to the window. The lights were on, and as much as I could see from the car, I thought the employee must have dozed off. I was about to honk the car once again when a voice spoke. "Welcome to Taco Bell." Even though I heard the voice, I still didn't see anybody appearing in the window. Being confused, I rolled down my car window to take a sneak peek when a bald head slowly got up from the floor right in front of the window. A bony, bald man with freaky green eyes stared at me and said, "May I take your order, ma'am?" Whoa, you almost scared me. Well, life is full of jump scares, isn't it? Yeah, no doubt. So what? Your order, ma'am. Yeah, right. I'll have the shredded chicken burrito and a Diet Pepsi. Fine. Being a woman in her late 30s, I've had my fair share of creepy encounters with strangers, but this man gave me a weird vibe. He was being so slow and staring at me as if he had never seen a woman before. I handed him the money when he asked me a pretty disturbing question. "It's not safe to drive at this hour alone." I have some work. Keeping my answers precise and direct, I tried to imply that it's none of his business, but the man didn't seem to get the hint that much. While counting the change, he asked again, "How much longer will you have to drive before you reach home?" Excuse me? You see, the weather is bad, and a storm can come any minute now. If you want, you can come in and wait for a while. Thank you for your concern, but I'm a big girl. I can handle things myself. Can you please hurry up on the order? Sure. I was shocked by his audacity, but I figured him out as a creep and nothing else. He didn't seem pleased with my reply, but I had no other option than to draw a line the way things were going. The man gave me a death stare. He then lunged close to the car to hand me over my order when I felt his bony fingers shoving a small piece of paper with the food bag. Having enough, I was all set to scream at him when I opened that sheet, and my stomach dropped. In that small piece of paper, he has written, "Someone is hiding in your back seat." I immediately looked at him, and he nodded his head with wide eyes. So this was why he was telling me to wait inside the drive-thru. I knew if I looked back, it would only cause more problems. Drops of sweat appeared on my forehead as I sensed the danger lurking. I somehow got my shit together and said, "Well, before I go, can I use the washroom?" Of course, ma'am. Please, come on in." I got down from the car and walked straight inside the drive-thru. As soon as I got in, the man locked the door behind me and said, "Sorry if I made you uncomfortable. I saw someone lying in your back seat from the moment you arrived here. I was just trying to help you." I apologized to him for not taking his hint before. The man then walked to the fryer to pick up his phone lying on the desk nearby. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll call 911 right now. I've already locked the door so that he can't enter. The cops will be..." He was going on, but I didn't let him finish. As he reached in front of the fryer, I lunged at him, grabbing his head and dunked his face into the boiling hot oil. A sick smile bloomed on my face as his painful screams appeared like music to my ears. He didn't even get the chance to speak, and his eyes, nose, and mouth got severely deep fried, like those crunchy nacho fries from Taco Bell. His body flocked like a dying bird for some time, and I didn't let him go. Lucky for me, he was a bony dude, and I was stronger than him. I felt a bit sad for killing him, but trust me, I had no other way. I was headed back to a stranded location to dump a fresh body. There was indeed someone in my back seat, but he wasn't alive. After investing my entire life in my boyfriend, can you believe he didn't hesitate to cheat on me? So, I had to take my revenge. I poisoned him when he came to take his stuff from my apartment and asked for a glass of water. Now I was all set to drive to a nice location, dig up a grave in the woods and bury him with the utmost care. But this bony dude saw more than he should have. Hence, curiosity killed the cat. Now I will have to dump 2 bodies instead of 1 and destroy all the CCTV footage before leaving. Maybe the newspapers will print 2 stories of missing people in a few days or weeks, and cops will run a routine check. But I am a passive liar and a pretty accomplished psychopath. I know how to get out of this without getting any mud on me. The only thing that worries me now is the fun I just had doing all this. I can't assure you that these 2 will be my last victims. This is probably the craziest incident of my life till now, but I don't think I will ever face something more bizarre than this one. I was working my usual night shifts in KFC on a Thursday. Being bored and not having any customers in the last hour, I went out to smoke. It was 2 o'clock at night. The empty highway stood in front of my eyes like a long forgotten trail. I must have taken a few drags when I heard the entrance doorbell ring. Realizing a customer had arrived, I quickly got in from the back door and headed straight to the counter. Entering the restaurant, I got shocked to see the customer who had just come in. A woman in her late 30s was standing next to the counter with a baby wrapped in her arm. Her physical appearance was so weird that I completely ignored her baby and kept looking at her. She wasn't anything like those new moms. Her clothes were so dirty that one could barely guess their actual color. She seemed like a woman who had been living on the streets for a while. As I was staring at her too widely, she understood what was going on inside my head and said, "Are you going to take my order?" Realizing how insulting I had been, I immediately made up for my behavior and politely said, "Welcome to KFC, ma'am. What would you like to order?" "That's better. Please accept my apology." "Okay. I will have a big fried chicken bucket with fries and a Pepsi to go." "Okay, ma'am. Please take your seat." She slowly walked to the table nearby and sat down, holding her baby in her arms. Realizing the baby was sleeping, I tried to be as quiet as possible. I went to the kitchen and asked our night chef to start this order. Coming back, I saw the woman staring at her baby with an affectionate smile. The smile reminded me of my mom when she used to caress my cheek before tucking me into bed. No one in this world can love you more than your mother, and seeing this woman, I couldn't help but feel a little emotional. She was kissing the baby and humming a lullaby while swinging it slowly in her arms. I felt terrible for the poor woman. Maybe she's going through a rough patch in her life, but unlike every other mom, she too wants to give her child the best. I kept watching her with the corner of my eye. It was lovely to see her caring for her baby. After 10 minutes, her food came. I placed it on a tray and started walking to her table. Seeing me approaching her, she became conscious and hugged her baby even closer to her chest. I wanted to take a sneak peek of her cute baby, but I understood she was protective of it. Also, my behavior might have scared her off a bit, so her reaction was understandable. "Here's your food, ma'am. Please enjoy and let me know if you need anything more." Holding my curiosity, I returned to the counter and gave her space to enjoy her food. Her bony structure does incline that she hasn't eaten for a while, so I didn't want to disturb her anymore. Seeing the giant bucket of chicken, her eyes dazzled in joy. She started gobbling her food. She grabbed a chicken leg and tore a huge chunk of meat. I could hear her smacking and making chomping noises as she ate so loudly. After finishing 3 chicken legs in a blink of an eye, she looked at her baby and said, "Look who's finally awake. Did I wake you up? Well, you can't eat KFC chicken quietly." "No, you can't eat them. You're not old enough. I promise when you grow up, I'll bring you here, and then you can eat as many fried chickens as you want." I adored her way of talking to her baby, but I don't know why one thing kept hammering in my mind. When I went to deliver her order, a strong smell of bleach came from her. Her clothes don't seem like they've been washed in years, so I was a bit confused why she smelled like bleach all of a sudden. While I was thinking all this, the woman talked to her baby like before. "Yes, Dad will see us soon. Till then, we have to be a good girl and listen to what Mommy says, okay?" Oh, then it's a sweet little girl. Knowing this, I finally decided that when she would come up to the counter to pay, I would ask her to let me take the baby and play with her once. I also decided to give her some cash to help her and her baby. Being a woman, I'm very well aware of the hardships of a mother, so I wanted to help this woman in my small way. The fact that the father of this baby left his wife and kid in this situation did trigger me, and I felt angry at that man. Things were going fantastic so far until something creepy happened. The woman suddenly started to shush the child, saying, "No, don't cry. Mommy's here. Don't cry, Emma. You know if you cry, I will cry too. Come on, my angel, don't cry." She got up from her seat and started to swing her baby back and forth like parents do to stop their baby from crying. Except in this case, her baby wasn't crying at all. This hit me hard as I realized that I hadn't heard the baby make a single sound since she had been here. Is this woman insane? If not, then what the hell is wrong with her? As soon as the thought struck in my mind, I said in a fumbling voice, "Ma'am? Your baby is not crying." "What do you mean she's not crying? Don't you hear her weeping?" What are you saying? There's no other sound except both of our voices." "How the hell would you know? You're too young, and you certainly don't look like a mother. Leave my baby and me alone. Since I arrived here, I've seen you staring at my baby. There's no way I'm letting you get close to her." "No, ma'am. I'm just trying to help you. If you..." "Shut up! Can't you see your voice is making her cry even louder?" "But your baby is not crying." She completely ignored me and started to shush her baby like before, as if it was crying. Feeling utterly confused and messed up in this entire situation, I started calling Albert, our night chef, to come out. Hearing my voice, he rushed out of the kitchen, and I explained to him the entire situation while pointing at this woman. The woman wasn't even looking at us anymore. She was just humming a lullaby and swinging her baby back and forth like Albert and I weren't even there. Not able to take the suspense anymore, we walked up to her and looked into her arms. What I saw made my skin crawl. There indeed was a baby, but it wasn't alive. Instead, it was the corpse of a dead baby with a disfigured face that had started to rot. No doubt this child had died long back, and the bleach I smelt was coming from it. By the rules of natural human life, the corpse had begun to decompose, resulting in maggots and other bacteria taking onto it. Maybe to drive them away, this woman sprinkled bleach on her baby's corpse. When the cops came and took her to the hospital, I was utterly shattered. Her senses kicked in when the paramedics explained to her how her baby was no more, and she was crying like hell. It was later revealed that this woman was homeless when a man randomly picked her up from the street, offering her money in exchange for intercourse. The man probably paid her and left, but unfortunately she became pregnant under her challenging circumstances. Even though she gave birth to a healthy baby girl, being addicted to drugs and living a degrading lifestyle, She failed to care for her. The trauma of losing her baby hit her so hard that she started to pretend that it was alive and carried the corpse in her arms wherever she went. The fact that she got some money somehow and came to KFC for food with a dead child in her arms can be the last thing to expect from any sane person. It breaks my heart that no one even bothered to help her, or at least show interest in her. I am sharing this story to reach out to the guy who slept with her without using protection and never cared to check back on her. So if you're watching this, jackass, I want to tell you out loud that just because she was homeless and messed up, your disgusting behavior can never be justified. You should have at least been a man and checked on her. I hope you burn in hell. I enjoyed working the night shift at my local Domino's most of the time. There weren't many orders coming in after 8 o'clock. The town was small, sleepy, and a little boring, if I'm being truthful. That was all fine by me. The night shift paid $16 an hour and gave me ample opportunity to catch up on my reading. So, when an order came in around 10 on a freezing December night, I wasn't too thrilled to pick up the phone. I considered letting it ring out, but got nervous that it might be my boss checking up on me. I grabbed the receiver on the 5th ring. Domino's Pizza, what's up? The person on the line didn't respond at first. I heard him breathing softly, a little fast, like he was excited. Large cheese pizza, a man's voice said eventually. That's it? No reply. Okay, where am I taking this? The man whispered an address, then hung up before I could tell him the total cost of the order. I sighed and got up from my chair to start the pizza. Ask anybody who knows me, and they'll tell you I'm an aggressively lazy person. I don't disagree, but I try to use that to my advantage, to make myself efficient so I can get away with doing as little work as possible. I rolled out the dough, tossed it in the air a few times until it was as wide as a small bicycle wheel, then plopped it on the counter. Sauce, toppings, oven. The whole process took me less than 10 minutes, and then I was in my beat-up car on my way to deliver the order. I recognized the neighborhood my GPS directed me to immediately. My town was so small that there weren't many streets I didn't know. In fact, the address for the delivery belonged to a former high school classmate of mine, Brandon something. The voice that called into Domino's didn't sound like the guy I remembered, but it was a decade since our graduation, so whatever, people change. The house was a 2-story colonial, mundane in every way. The only odd thing was that the lights were off and there was no car in the driveway. If somebody hadn't just ordered a pizza, I would have just assumed the house was unoccupied. Nobody answered when I rang the doorbell. After 4 more rings and several minutes, I started knocking. The pizza was getting cold and I didn't want to get in trouble for a late delivery. Plus, I looked like a goofball standing there in my Domino's polo in front of a dark house. A full minute of knocking later, I decided to try the door on a whim. It was unlocked. I went back and forth for a few seconds, then decided to open the door so I could call out. "Anyone home?" I yelled, head poking in the open door. The house was pitch black. "Hey, I have a pizza here. Hello?" No reply. In for an inch, in for a mile, I figured, leaning in further to paw at the wall for a light switch. When the lights clicked on and revealed the living room, I screamed. There were 2 bodies on the floor, a man and a woman, both in their late 20s or early 30s. It was difficult to tell since both corpses were missing their heads. Someone had also hacked the limbs off each body, then placed the arms and legs in a neat pile on the couch. There was blood everywhere, on the walls, soaked into the rug, even splattered on the ceiling. I ran and didn't stop running until I was inside of my car. I hit the gas and lurched forward. It was several minutes before I stopped hyperventilating enough to call 911. After the operator calmed me down, I pulled into the nearest parking lot to wait for the police. A cruiser pulled in a little later, and 2 officers took my statement. They told me another car was heading towards the house where I found the bodies. I didn't go back to work to lock up that night. Actually, I didn't so much leave my bedroom for the next week except to use the bathroom and eat. Domino's was perpetually short-staffed at the best of times, so after 8 days of coaxing, I finally let my supervisor talk me into taking another shift. I was still rattled but needed the money. According to the news reports, the investigation into the double homicide I discovered was still ongoing. They managed to ID the headless bodies, though the man was Brandon Myers, my former classmate. The woman was his wife. The identity of the man who ordered the pizza to their address was still unknown. I stared at the phone as it rang. It stopped after 8 rings. I counted. I finally let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I'm not sure why I answered. I guess I didn't want to be scared of picking up a phone for the rest of my life. I reached for the receiver with trembling hands and pressed it to my ear. "Hello?" I asked. "Large cheese pizza." It was the same voice. I was frozen, unable to respond or hang up. After a pause, the voice whispered an address into my ear. Then the phone went dead with a click. I spent the next 5 minutes staring at the wall before snapping out of it. I called 911. "I think there's been a murder," I told the dispatcher. The police came to Domino's about an hour later. They'd visited the address I gave them but couldn't find anything suspicious. The house appeared to be abandoned. They weren't able to check inside without a warrant, but performed a walkthrough of the property and got a good look at most of the first floor through the windows. Nothing out of the ordinary. I thanked the officers and tried to get back to work. Barely 15 minutes after they left, the phone began to ring again. I watched the receiver vibrate in its cradle like a rattlesnake, threatening to bite if I got too close. Once again, I couldn't help myself. I had to know who was calling. "What do you want?" I asked. Silence, quick breathing. Then the man's voice again, with the same order and same address, the ones the cops just visited. "Who are you?" I asked, but he'd already hung up. I weighed my options. If I sent the police over there again and they found nothing, they might not answer the call next time. But if I delivered the pizza and found another gruesome crime scene, I wasn't sure my sanity could take it. I ignored the order, but had a strong hunch the man would keep calling. I made a decision. I wouldn't live in fear. Instead of making the pizza, though, I went behind the counter. We kept a taser under the cash register at Domino's, just in case a psycho came in and the staff needed to protect themselves before police could arrive. I hid the taser in an empty pizza box, went out to my car, and started driving. When I pulled up to the address the mystery caller provided, I could see why the police thought the house was abandoned. Kudzu and vines crawled up one side of the single-story rancher. There were shingles missing from the roof, and one of the windows had a massive crack in the glass. I approached the weather-beaten door with my pizza and knocked. There was no doorbell. The door swung open on my third knock, just like the last time. The interior of the house was dark. Delivery, I called out. There was a sudden movement from the darkness to my left. A shadow darker than the rest, moving fast. I barely had time to react. Somehow, I managed to grab the taser from the box and fire it into the shape as it rushed me. There was the click, click, click of the prongs activating, pouring electricity into the wires hooked to the thing attacking me. The shadow screamed, tripping and falling into the rectangle of light that came from my headlights and the open door. It was a man, tall and scrawny, dressed in denim and flannel. He had wild gray hair and a black beard, and the most hateful eyes I'd ever seen. The stranger tried to get up, pawing at the taser prongs hooked to his chest. Before he could pull them out, I hit him with another dose of electricity, then another. He collapsed to thrash on the floor, muscles convulsing, back bending. I kept the hooks in him while I called 911, but he looked like he'd passed out. The cops were there in 7, I remember. I counted. It was the longest 7 minutes of my life. I found out later through a friend on the police force just how lucky I was that night. When the cops searched the house, they found a kill room in the basement. The stranger had covered the space in clear plastic sheeting and dragged a table into the middle of the room. He brought tools with him: a hacksaw, knives, shears, duct tape, zip ties, and bleach. But it was the deranged man's confession that was truly chilling. He casually told the cops every terrible thing he planned to do to me. He'd pull me apart, just like he'd done to the couple I'd found murdered a week before. Then, once he'd arranged my corpse just how he wanted it, he'd call in a delivery order. That was his fetish, making innocent people discover his victims. If I hadn't acted fast with a taser, I would have been killed and laid out on the floor like a department store display. Then some poor Chinese takeout driver or subrunner would have been called to the house to find my brutalized remains. I don't work at Domino's anymore. I found a safer job, fighting forest fires. It makes my skin crawl when I recall this incident. Just to be popular on social media, people are willing to go to any extent. I was working at the fast food chain Wendy's when this incident took place. I was 19 years old, a high school dropout, trying my hands at anything and everything to earn some cash back then. A friend of mine got me this job. It was a small outlet near the highway, so most of our customers were truckers and people driving by the road. I generally worked in the morning shift, but whenever I needed cash, I did some overtime. The night shifts never caused me any issue or worry, so I was more than willing to work late at night. Also, the payment was high for night shifts, hence, I couldn't say no to that. I lived in a small studio apartment and drove to work in my brother's old scooter that he gave me before leaving for college. It was a warm Friday night, and I was on my way to my night shift. I wanted to see my parents that weekend, so I decided to get extra cash for the upcoming expenditures. My dad's birthday was knocking on the door, and I planned to buy him something nice with that additional payment. There wasn't much traffic on the highway. On my 15 minutes ride, I could only see 2 cars and 1 truck pass by. We don't get many customers late night, so in a way, I preferred night shifts, as there was less work. I parked my scooter and entered the restaurant. The evening shift employee handed me over the keys and left for home. Our night chef was working in the kitchen, so I sat behind the counter and waited for a customer to arrive. After half an hour, 2 truckers came in and bought some barbecue cheeseburgers. I was handing them the order when another customer entered the store. A woman in her late 30s walked to the nearest table and sat down. She had a backpack which she placed next to her and stared at me with wide eyes. Her creepy, cold stare made me realize she wanted me to come and take her order. Generally, most people come to the counter and give their orders, but she probably wanted the VIP treatment. Being young and a beginner at this job, I didn't want to create any trouble. So after the truckers left, I walked to her table. "Welcome to Wendy's. May I take your order?" "1 Baconator combo, 2 cheeseburgers, a large bucket of spicy chicken, 1 large fries, 20-piece spicy nuggets, and 1 lemonade large. Make it quick." I don't have all night." "Sure, ma'am." Even though she was overly rude, I still gave a humble smile and walked to the kitchen with this huge order. The woman didn't tell me to parcel them, so I guess she will only eat them here. As I came back to the counter, I saw her setting up a camera right in front of her. She then tried to tie her messy hair into a bun and started putting blood red lipstick on. It didn't take me time to understand that she was going to record a mukbang video right here. These eating ASMR videos are now a big deal on the internet, and I follow many mukbangers, but this was my first time to see one face to face. There was no reason I could stop her from doing it because, in a way, she was advertising Wendy's food. So I kept quiet and watched her pulling off this show. After 20 minutes, the chef and I placed all the food on her table. Chef Burton was surprised to see this woman, but we both kept quiet as she bought a large amount of food from us. Chef went back to the kitchen and I sat down to watch what she did next. She pressed the play button and the recording started. She said in a creepy, squeaky voice, "Hello guys, tonight's menu is Wendy's. As you can see, I have so many foods ahead of me. There will be a big surprise at the end, so do watch the entire video. I'll eat now." Saying this, she grabbed a handful of fries and shoved them inside her mouth. The amount was too much, so most of the fries were hanging out of her mouth as she struggled to chew them. After finishing it, she bit a large chunk of the cheeseburger and shoved some spicy nuggets along with that. The way she was eating was disgusting to watch. I could see saliva mixed with food dripping from her mouth. She went on eating like this, and I thought, who would like to watch such a sickening mukbang video? Her ways of eating food were enough to make any viewers nauseous. After finishing her fries, cheeseburger, and the Baconator combo, she went for the spicy chicken. She grabbed a sizable, saucy piece of chicken and started licking it while staring directly at the camera. She was laughing in between as if it was funny, when, in reality, it wasn't. I was secretly wishing that she would leave, but she seemed pretty comfortable in doing all this creepy stuff. Her face got smeared in the red sauce, so did her hands, and she ate the chicken like a hungry wolf. Her bright eyes made her face appear like a demon, and red sauce seemed like blood on her mouth. In front of my eyes, she finished all the food while smiling like a freak. I was relieved that now she would finally leave, but what she did next was beyond my imagination. She said in her squeaky voice once again, "Now it's time for the big surprise, guys, that you all have been waiting for." She grabbed the empty chicken bucket and started vomiting in it, putting her fingers in her mouth. She was gagging herself forcefully and vomiting in front of the camera. Her eyes went backwards as she choked herself. "What the hell? What the hell are you doing?" "Don't disturb me!" She vomited like crazy, and I was in shock to witness. After filling the bucket with her vomit, she wiped her face and hands with a tissue paper. Then, like nothing happened, she grabbed the entire bucket and started drinking her vomit. I couldn't take it anymore and called Chef Burton. Hearing my scream, he rushed in and saw the woman doing the unthinkable. We screamed at her to stop, but she wasn't stopping. Finishing that gooey liquid in one go, she wiped her face for one last time and smiled at the camera again. "That's all for today, guys. I'll be back again." We stood behind the counter, frozen in shock and disgusted, as we never expected anyone to eat their own vomit. She turned off the camera and started sipping the lemonade as if nothing happened. She must have taken 2-3 sips when suddenly she got up coughing. Her eyes were turning backwards and she coughed terribly. "Oh my God, she's choking on her vomit. Call the paramedics, now." I started calling the paramedics with trembling hands, while Chef Burton ran towards her and started patting her back to stop her from choking. But she was gagging for real now, and I could see the pain in her face. Her face was turning blue, as if she couldn't breathe anymore. Not knowing how to help her, Chef Burton and I couldn't do anything but watch this woman die. She collapsed on the floor, grabbing her neck and coughing terribly. When the paramedics came, it was all over. The woman was lying on the floor with her mouth wide open and eyes rolled up. She even peed herself from the trauma of the situation. The cops came in and saw the entire video and the CCTV footage. They realized that this woman was crazy and killed herself. We could do nothing to save her, so Chef Burton and I both left the job, and it was too much to go back to work, recalling that horrible memory. I don't watch mukbang videos anymore, as they remind me of that terrifying night shift at Wendy's. I hope people stop running behind popularity, as too much of anything can destroy your life forever, or even kill you.